Okay, well, all you have to do is just hang on and chat. So we're live now on all three platforms.
Ah,
So I'm
okay.
going to go ahead and put in my Substack. Feel free to put in yours as well. Um, so again, we're live on three platforms. We're live on TikTok, on YouTube, and on Substack. And both you and I reconnected because we're both writing for Substack, and we come from the point of view of aging from a little bit of a different perspective. And so I love having this discussion with you because I'm a bit of a Pollyanna and you're a bit of, I guess I'll call you a realist. And so
Maybe even a curmudgeon. I don't know.
so, if anybody on TikTok would like to be able to see Michael, just go to my YouTube account, Dr. Deborah Heiser, or go to my Substack, The Right Side of 40. So, listen, Michael, let's dive right in. Tell us about your most recent Substack post that you made.
Well, the most recent is coming out tomorrow, uh, and it's called "I Was Not Ready for Death, Are You?"
Oh,
So, I don't know how much continuity there is in your audience, and so how much we should repeat. But as you know, my wife died uh, in July, and
yeah.
so I am living through the process of grief, which is something I confess I didn't understand until I was in it. I'm not entirely sure I understand it yet, uh, although I'm certainly living it. But in any event, um, I I was surprised. Uh,
You know, I want to first of all, I want to say again, I'm sorry for your loss. I met your lovely wife. She was phenomenal. I know that this is a really hard time for you. I'm glad you're talking about it because Michael is has been in the field of aging and studying it and researching it and advocating for 50 years. And we talk about these things. I don't talk about it much, death, and when I'm talking about midlife. And so it's something that isn't talked about enough. And so I'm really so glad that even though you're in pain right now, you're willing to talk about it. So take us to where you are right now and what inspired you to write about this.
well, it inspired me to
I
write
know
about it.
Harry's death, but you've been talking a lot about this and writing about a lot of different things. But what
Well,
it's
as you know, I became convinced um, not terribly long ago that there's a neglect of people who are very old. It seems to me that when we talk about geriatric issues, we divide it up into two categories: older people who are really doing pretty well, and older people who are very disabled. So dementia, of course, is a very big topic, and
yeah.
everyone talks about aging. And I think there is, and I'm living it, another category, and that is people who are struggling with many, many different challenges, uh, and who are nevertheless managing to make lives for themselves that they find satisfying. So I think that being have been perceived because of what I've written as really negative about very old age, and God knows my mood these days is not exactly positive. So probably I'm tilting in that direction. But I do believe that people can have really good lives despite uh, what they're living through. So you ask what inspired me to write about this. It's this sense that there are a significant number of people. We're actually talking, if we talk about people over 80, we're talking about something like 15 million people in America are over 80.
Yeah.
And that number is expected to grow in 10 years to about 22 or 23 million. This is a large population. Now, some portion of that population is seriously disabled, but another portion of that population uh, is not. Uh, so I, having been a geriatric advocate for a long time, and increasingly over the years, more and more frequently became the oldest person in the room. And beginning to have the sense that younger people, I'm sorry, Deborah, it's good that you're younger. That's good for you. but there's something about being very old that is very hard to get. That was certainly true for me when I was 60-ish and really started focusing on geriatrics. I had the view that you have.
Yeah.
And I argued all the time against ageism. And I argued that when people said anything negative about aging, that they were essentially being ageist. And my friends in their 80s at that time said to me, Michael, just you wait. Well, I've waited and here I am. And what I've discovered, and I focus on three things in what I'm doing. One is physical decline. Mm-hmm. A second is mental decline, by which I don't mean dementia, but various kinds of loss of cognitive capacity. There are emotional changes as well. And particularly, again, for me, you understand why, loss. The losses accumulate. So my wife died at the end of July. Several friends had died before her in the past year. It simply becomes more common the older you get.
Yeah.
It becomes more common. You can have a lot of losses at 70. You can have a lot of losses at 40. But as you get older and older, the losses are going to accumulate. And as will physical decline. We can exercise as much as we like. And I confess, I hate exercise and I don't do much of it. So I'm not in as good shape as I ought to be. But I could have exercised like a demon and my wife would still be dead.
Yeah.
I'm losing my eyesight. That would still be happening. I could run through a list of things that would be happening.
You were running through a list of loss.
Yeah.
And, people, like I write about things like that occasionally, but you're talking about when you start to talk about the loss, and we should talk a little bit about this, like the loss of your wife, the loss that we're all going to lose ourselves one day, right? That we're all going to die. But also the losses, like you said, cognition without being suffering from dementia. We have all of these different losses that come to us that are inevitable, even if we can function and do well. Like, I need to wear glasses. I never needed to before. That's a loss, right? And they creep up and they don't feel like much in midlife. They're super doable. I can't run as fast as I used to when I was younger, but I'm replacing that with, happiness, contentedness, fulfillment. I know who I am. I have an expertise. I'm able to navigate differently. But now you're talking about another shift, right? So here in midlife, I feel pretty confident these losses don't matter as much to me, but now they do. Now you're in your 80s and they do. Can you talk a little bit about that shift and what that felt like for you? Was it gradual? Was it all at once? How did it happen?
Well, it's something that has taken place over time. Just one linguistic thing. I'm trying not to use the word loss to talk about the decline in capacity. When I use the word loss, I'm talking about my wife is dead.
Yeah.
My very close friend is dead.
How should that be phrased differently then? Because I think that's important to
I,
distinguish.
I think talking about decline or diminished capacity, here's an example of my mental decline. I can't think of the word that I usually use
Yeah,
to talk
I go
about
through it all the time. I can't remember names either.
Right, right. So, we expect that with aging.
Yeah.
Um, but some of it makes a difference. I just came from,
So
uh,
less, not loss. Is that what you mean?
yeah, loss is, it's gone.
Okay. Okay. So I see that then as a distinction of less versus loss, right? Because loss is talked about a lot, and I just used it, right? But then that, you know what, that diminishes the real feeling of loss when you actually lose someone like you just did.
Yeah, it's that I find is emotionally very, very powerful. And I don't know, I haven't really answered your question about what that experience is, right? So maybe I'm avoiding the feeling. I
You
was,
don't have to, and it's okay.
well, but I think, but let's talk about it. Uh, Again, that my next post is called "I Was Not Ready for Death." What wasn't I ready for? I wasn't ready for the emotional turmoil, and it's beyond sadness. Am I sad that my wife died? Yeah, for sure. But it's a lot more than that. Uh, I find myself, I don't know if this is true of everybody, you might have a better sense, you're a psychologist, but I find myself emotionally, I'm going to use this word, much more open than I ever was before in my life. Uh, in part, I've been socially released to talk about uh, what the experience is, but I'm just emotionally much looser. So I cry easily now. I
Okay.
could start
Right.
crying as we're talking,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
right? I mean, I just things it will suddenly well up in me.
Yeah.
Whether it's thinking about the loss of my wife, or it can be other things. Uh, I may have said this the last time we talked, but once I was at my granddaughter's soccer game and I'm watching these lovely 9-year-old girls playing soccer, and I started to cry.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm going to start crying now. But there was a sense of this is the continuity of life, and it's a sentimentality. This was never me. You knew me before.
Yeah, you're right.
This was never me. But all of a sudden, there are all sorts of things that will just set me off. Uh, and whether I'm just feeling the kind of distressing emotion one feels, or I actually break out into tears, which I do from time to time, less frequently now. Uh, I had some people over last night, and there was a woman who came who lost her husband 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And as the evening went on, she suddenly burst into tears. And she felt she had to leave. Uh, but it just came on suddenly.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I experienced that with the loss of my dad. And I've talked to other people who've had losses. And I was walking through a store, and all of a sudden it was like waterworks, like you see in a cartoon, like the water just flying out of my eyes. I didn't even, it just came out of nowhere.
Right.
But nobody really talks about that. I was not prepared for that. I needed like, a phone charger, and I had to ask someone for a phone charger and couldn't get it out because there were just waterworks flowing from my eyes that just came on suddenly. And So nobody prepares you for that, right?
I
And
think
then,
that's right.
yeah,
I certainly wasn't prepared for it. Um, and some of it is painful.
yeah.
A lot of it is painful. Um, there's also something, for me at least, that's positive about being able to be open about emotions, um, particularly in my case, uh, being able to be openly loving.
Oh, so you're saying all of your emotions have opened up.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. Tell me about that because nobody talks about that.
I don't know quite what to say about it, but
You're feeling them
I,
all?
I find myself in social situations. I mean, you've known me for many years.
Yeah.
You've never known me to be a sentimental guy.
No, I haven't. I actually think this is refreshing in some way to see you. I'm seeing a new side of you. For those who haven't, who don't know the backstory or just joining in, you and I knew each other decades ago, right? And for a while, both
Yeah,
in the same area, advocating for, geriatric, mental health, and I was also a researcher and looking at geriatrics and also advocating. You founded the Geriatric Mental Health Alliance and were really a force before I stepped into the arena in an area and at a time when nobody was doing it. So you and I, it was a small group of people. There weren't a lot of people doing this. Now, for the past 10 years, we haven't really been in touch because you moved, I moved, you and I both stepped out of the jobs that we had. Um, and now you were a force, Michael. Like you didn't mess around with you. You had a mission and you were driven and you were right. You were not an emotional guy. And so I'm now seeing you in a whole new way and um I wish there wasn't loss attached to it, but I am seeing a whole new emotional like a softer side, a vulnerable side that I've never seen before.
I think that's exactly what has happened.
Yeah.
Um, it's not that I was unfeeling before,
No.
but I never showed my feelings.
Yeah.
Um, and I have, over the course of my career, generally been perceived as an intimidating figure, tough-minded. Uh,
Yes, I would say that, and you have to be when you're advocating in an area, that, people don't understand or that's a new area. So,
so there's this change now where, in part, I have permission because of my wife's death to be able to say things that are emotional.
yeah.
But there's also something that's changed in me that um, a, a, a removal of defenses. Do you know John Zeisel's work?
No, tell me about it.
But John Zeisel wrote a book called "I'm Still Here," which is a wonderful piece of work. And John has focused in his work with people with dementia on creativity and helping them to become and to be creative in a variety of different ways. One of which is he's organized museum experiences around the world, uh, so that people with dementia who ordinarily would not be going anyplace go to museums. And he likes to talk about what they can see in paintings, for example, in a museum, that others of us may not see at all. But his fundamental theory is this, and I think it has some truth to it. And that is that we use our cognitive capacities, our brain power, our intellect to defend ourselves against creative impulses, against emotional impulses, against affection.
Yeah.
And that as those capacities break down, what emerges for some people who develop dementia, what emerges is anger that they never showed before. And we hear a lot about that. There are pills advertised and, all of that. We don't hear nearly as much about people with dementia whose affection suddenly emerges.
You're right. And it does. I've seen that.
Yeah.
It's lovely and it's wonderful. And I think I'm so glad you brought that up because it makes dementia even scarier because people only talk about the negatives, right? But
Right.
I have seen people who, were angry or who were so rigid open up with dementia. And it feels to me like they're happier than they've ever been. And I don't know that that's the right way to phrase it, but they're more content. They're satisfied in a way that they weren't before. And um, people don't write about that or talk about it because you don't need a pill for that. You don't need to have an intervention for that. And so I think people don't know that that exists. I'm glad you brought that up.
So, I think that the process that I'm going through, which is called grief,
Yeah.
has resulted in some breakdown of my defenses. Does that make me feel more vulnerable? You better believe it.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm also able to not hide my vulnerability in the way that I did in the days when you knew me, when I was an intellectual tough guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so that's something, again, talking about what wasn't I ready for. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for this. All of a sudden, all this emotionality, and it's beyond sadness. That just scratches the surface of what grief seems to be to me to be. The second element of it uh, is loneliness.
Yeah.
Uh, I continue to be very lonely. Now, I'm doing everything right, if I do say so myself. I'm extremely active. I play jazz, I do jazz photography at a quite high level. My playing is okay, but my photography is really good.
It is
I've
good.
got a whole community. I've written a post that'll come out in a few weeks called Jazz is My Salvation, in which I talk about what I can get out of that. So I'm busy. If anything, I'm overly busy. I have lots of people who I get together with and connect with in person, virtually, but I'm still lonely.
Yeah.
And the loneliness, and I've learned this from this process, there's, in my experience now, two different types of loneliness. There's the loneliness that I can deal with by being busy and being with people.
Hmm.
Right? And then I can feel pretty good. But the loss of the core connection that I had with my wife,
Yeah.
built up over 49 years, that we almost married 49 years. We knew each other 49 years. Uh, and the evolution of our relationship, from a relationship that began, as I say in this recent piece, or I think I say it there. I mean, it began with sexual passion. but we built a life together.
Mhm.
Went way the hell beyond that. Uh, and the loss of that, what does that mean? It means, and I said this, I think, the last time, I'm really lonely at night
Yeah.
when I'm alone.
Yeah.
I'm used to having somebody with me. I'm used to sharing my bed.
Yeah. You
And
know, I I I obviously haven't lived that, so I don't get that, but that is a fear of mine. I was talking to my husband about it and I said, I take for granted how I can run things by you whenever I want. I can talk to you about things that I say, "Oh, I'm unsure of this," or I want to share something that's great, or something annoying happened. And when you don't have that, there's, it's really, it goes to a primal level that you feel, a negativity about it. I think that loss is that loneliness in a way that, that a lot of us, myself included, take for granted, that we have this. And here you are, you don't have that. And
I think that's absolutely right.
yeah,
What's one of the things that's striking to me as I have become single is there are a whole lot of people who are single and they're okay with it.
yeah.
They,
Yes, you're
what,
right.
what
I
I'm
know that.
talking about is I had something else that I really valued,
Yeah.
and I've lost that. And I need to learn to be single. Uh,
Yeah. And that's
so,
not easy.
no. Um, it's also, I'm used to a certain expectations. So I said in my eulogy for Harriet that after I got to the end of the eulogy, I got up from my desk to take it inside to show her. Because, like you, I would take things that I was writing that were important and I would show them to her, get her opinion. And she wasn't there.
Yeah.
Um, so there's the loss of that. There's also the loss of just everyday talk.
Yeah. Hmm.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, most nights she and I would have dinner together. Also, one of the things that I've learned is this is it just me? I don't know if there have been studies of this. I always knew who I was going to be with on Saturday night.
Hmm.
There's a song, Saturday night is the loneliest night of the week.
Yeah.
And I find that it's really important to me to have to be with somebody on Saturday night. The holidays were similar kind of thing.
Yeah. Holidays are tough.
But I always knew I didn't have to make, you know, ask somebody for a date. I,
Right.
I always
Right.
knew. Maybe something would happen. Harriet would go off to see her family in Canada sometimes. Didn't matter. If she was away, she was always with me. Uh, so that kind of loneliness is a key part of this. Um, Another part of it is the sense of having been abandoned.
Yeah.
And I find myself, here I am, not talking as a scientist, just talking about my experience with this. But not only do I have that sense, which I think is quite common, uh, uh, but also it makes me a bit hypersensitive to uh, you know, in life, things are uncertain.
Yeah.
We're used to that. Uh, but I think I overinterpret when something doesn't happen, or I'm not able to do something with somebody I want to do it with. Uh, I'm much more easily hurt.
I think that a lot of people are. People just don't talk about it.
I think that this is common, and
I
I
agree
think
with you.
it's that people don't talk about it, and it's why I'm talking about it.
And I'm glad you are, because there are so many people that, you know, when you're going through this, or if you are going to go through this, it hits you like a brick wall. And when no one wants to talk about it, or if it's a taboo subject, or you don't, how do you even know where to go to talk about it? So I'm so glad you are, and I'm glad that you're being vulnerable with this, because I think it's helpful for so many. You know, a lot of people don't write about it, they don't talk about it. When they do, it's in such a narrow area, it's hard to find it, to actually utilize it.
And
Um,
as I think we said the last time, the words that people use tend to be fairly abstract.
yes. Yeah,
Uh,
or very kind of clinical. Like if you walk somebody through the steps of something, it's much different than using the emotional words that have to do with it. You know,
if you read up on grief, it'll say, for example, that people who are in grief are likely to experience depression and anxiety. Well,
what does that look and feel like when a person says that,
exactly. What
right?
does it look and feel like?
And, you know, if somebody were to say that to me, you know, when you, and especially, you know, because I studied depression for so long, depression looks different for different people and different ages. You know, you have a whole different depression screener once you hit old age than you do when you're younger. Um, and so, what does depression look and feel like when you are in grief? It could be something different. It could look different on different people and feel different for different people, but they don't use those words that describe looking and feeling.
I also think that the sadness, to use a much too weak word, of 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 grief is different from clinical depression.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
I think most clinicians would say that, but that means it feels different. It feels different. There's in
Yeah.
clinical depression. Well, I mean, we could go through what the
Depression
characteristics.
is you kind of feel the same, right? Grief is waves, like you just described, or like I described, walking through a store and all of a sudden, boom, out it
Right.
comes. And then you'll be like, I'm all right after a little while. And then, boom, out of nowhere, you're just hit. It doesn't creep up, it just hits you, smacks you in the face.
I think
That's
that's right.
different from depression, which is sort of like it's always there. There's a presence that's continuous with depression.
And clinical depression is also characterized by loss of interest in the things that
Yeah.
used to give you pleasure. And I don't know that I don't know. Maybe you do, but I don't know that people in grief suddenly, who love to watch baseball no longer want to watch baseball. Or to use a very prosaic example, uh,
I
my experience, I'm very sad much of the time, very lonely much of the time,
Yeah.
but I still want to be doing the things that
Yeah.
matter to me, and things still do matter to me. That's different from a clinical depression.
It is. It is. It is different. I think that there hasn't been a good distinction between the two. So it's hard sometimes when you're seeing individuals to find out, is this depression or is this grief? Because grief also can be something that lasts a little bit longer for some. You know,
Yes,
some people, it's like couple of months, they're good to go, you know, and by good to go, that I don't mean it like that, but they don't get hit with the waves the same way. they are able to move on in some way. But it also depends on the relationship with the person and how that relationship was and how that death was, because you have a lot of guilt with death and grief that oftentimes isn't there with depression in the same way. There's a lot of differences, but those things aren't really teased out in the same way. And people often don't talk about their guilty feelings as openly with grief as they would, you know, otherwise. So there's a lot there to that's, and some people don't feel guilt, because maybe they, whatever the issue is, everybody's thing is different. So
Yeah, I don't think I have felt guilt. I have felt anger,
yeah, yeah,
which is, I think, entirely common.
very, yeah,
And the I do it less now, but I used to get up in the middle of the night. I don't sleep well ever, and this now means, woof, I really don't sleep well.
yeah,
Um, but I cursed the universe on many nights. Um, I've been very angry with the healthcare system, as you can tell from some of what I've written.
yeah, yeah,
Some of that is unquestionably displacement from my anger that Harriet was dying and then died.
yeah.
I'm also angry at Harriet, and
Left you.
it's abandoned me.
Yeah.
Some nerve. I talk to her sometimes at night, and I say to her, Harriet, all right, you've been dead long enough. Cut it out already.
That sounds like the old Michael.
Yeah. Uh,
So here we are. We're people who are in different. I'm in midlife. You're in older adulthood, and I actually am learning from you right now, because I was using the word loss very broadly, not realizing how that removes the actual strength of the feeling of true loss, right? And I think that that's something that I'm going to probably write a little bit about, because looking at things that maybe we might have a decline in, like you mentioned, things like that are very different from loss. And we write about loss in a broad stroke.
yeah.
I'm learning a lot from you about this, because grief is encompassed in the loss that you're talking about. And it's not in something like needing reading glasses. I
No.
don't have grief over needing reading glasses. I put them on and I'm like, I don't like it, but you do it. And that is something that we're robbing people of, being able to have that word that relates to the intensity of what loss really is.
Yeah, I used to use the word loss to talk about the decline of physical and mental abilities. And through this experience that I'm having, I've realized what the difference is
Yeah.
between loss of someone who you care deeply about and, all right, so my hearing isn't what it used to be. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Or as you say, you now need glasses. I need hearing aids.
Yeah, I can't run as fast as I used to. I don't mourn those things. I adjust. And there's a big difference, because the mourning is the added part that you're talking about. Just for anybody coming in, Michael Friedman has been in the field of geriatric mental health advocacy for 50 years. And he writes for Substack about being very old. He's in his 80s. I am an applied developmental psychologist and have been in the field of aging for about 25 years. So about half the time that Michael has been. Um, just to give you a little bit of a perspective on this, when Michael started in the field of aging, mental health and aging were things nobody touched with a 10-foot pole. And I can tell you that, when I did a Google search in like the early 2000s, and I typed in old man, the only thing that came up was Santa Claus. 5 years later, if you typed in old man, it was only photos of people in with serious frailty and issues and vulnerable. And Michael has been advocating before it even got to Google, right? And so talking about it to people who didn't want to hear about it, people who, it wasn't on anybody's radar. So I just wanted to set the stage for that, because here you are now living it. And you're now at the point where you're guiding us still, by, I think, now adding more of the emotional component to it. We've all been sort of getting the things in place that need to be in place. Like we had the addition of palliative care and hospice and geriatric mental health that was looked at in a new and different way. The symptoms of mental health might present differently in old age than they do in younger age. So just to set the stage, Michael is here now. He recently lost his wife, but he's been writing on Substack. And I have been following his writing because it's making me think of aging differently. I write and have been talking about all the wonderful aspects of becoming middle-aged and all the emotional wonderfulness of that. But Michael's talking about a new set of emotions that set in just a decade later, maybe 2 decades later, and how that looks. And it's so important, I think, that he and I have some discussions and that we share it with everyone, because getting older is still the Wild West for a lot of us. And we need guides who can tell us what to expect. So thank you, Michael, for coming on again today. If you missed the last discussion, it is on my YouTube, so you can go and find it, and you can watch that live stream. But we're back again today, and we're really talking about how it looks and feels to be in grief if you have a loss, a legitimate loss, not a loss of, some of your near or distant vision where you need glasses, not the loss of running fast like you maybe could have when you were younger, but loss that's true and real that comes with grief. So thanks, Michael, for being on today.
Well, thank you for having me on. As you know, I have considerable admiration for your work. And I think you do a remarkable job of getting information out there about the realities of midlife and of the oncoming of old age. I just pulled out here, as we've said, the thrust of what I say is you get to be over 80, never mind the exact age, right? Somewhere around there. And the older you get, the more likely it is that things are going to be difficult. And that's what I've placed a lot of emphasis on. But here's what I wrote about getting old. All right? I happen to have it here.
Oh, good.
I wrote, the way I feel about being over 80 is quite different from the way I felt at 65 when I became officially old. It was good to have Medicare, good to have senior discounts, good to retire at 67 and to no longer work for pay, good to have Social Security, wonderful not to have to raise money to support my not-for-profit work. Boy, that was terrific.
Yeah.
A lot less stress, reduced ambition, more time for travel and my avocations. Happy to continue to be a social advocate as a volunteer. I enjoyed teaching more as I became older because I could prepare my lectures more carefully. It's great fun getting together with former colleagues and swap war stories. Uh, and I enjoyed walking a couple of miles a day, especially when I was in Paris. And it was truly wonderful that my wife and I had more time for good sex. So there's, for the people who are in their 50s like you got a lot of good stuff to look forward to.
Yeah.
But it will get tougher the older you get. I always quote my friend Alice, who's now 99, who started to say in her 80s, the thing about aging, it's not good for your health. And
Now, Michael, do you think that if you knew any of this ahead of time, that you would have been able to prepare differently for it? Or do you think that it's just something that you should just buckle up and get ready for?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. Would I have done things differently? Would I have been? I don't know. I'm writing on the assumption that by sharing my experience and the experience of others, it's, as you've pointed out, I do know the literature to some degree, that it will help people not to be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Uh,
surprise is a big, that's one of the biggest things. When you're surprised by something, it's an added thing that you have to deal with.
uh,
So,
so
sorry.
maybe people who are your age who read what I'm writing now about being over 80, and other people, of course, have written about very old age. Maybe that will help you when you get to that point. I won't be around for you to tell me, Deborah. So,
You don't know that. You don't know.
oh,
But
yeah.
what I think about is the new work that they have on both men and women aging, and the biggest one right now, which is menopause, right? And no one talked about that. It was like you just would hit it and be like, "What in the world happened?" And that makes it scary. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what to look for. Now they're starting to talk about it. It's become a topic that is discussed all the time. And those symptoms and things that people would say, am I going crazy? Or am I dying? Is there something, wrong with me? Is now a completely different feeling. So, you're coming out and talking about aging and loss and everything that goes with it in a way that I truly do think that if we continue this dialogue, that fear factor or that surprise when something hits you isn't going to be as, as big of a hit if we kind of know what to expect. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I'm speculating, but I do know that with menopause, that I was like, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
And so did so many other women. But now that the discussion is happening, people are able to communicate with each other. There's information out there. Here are some things that you can look for. It's not going to change it. It's still there. Nobody likes it, but you're not alone.
Well, I hope what I'm writing is useful.
It is.
I think you're choosing the example of menopause to talk about changes that women experience. I, of course, don't understand women. And
I'm looking at it like life.
maybe a little bit, but but women as they age go through some very significant changes, menopause being one of them. What happens with women's sexuality as they age? It's
There's a person, Bruce Wiley, who writes for Forbes, and he's been writing a lot about this sort of stuff. And so people should follow him if they're interested in this. It's still an open area that's not, pretty new that people are starting to write about and talk about. And he's a physician, so it's really and a researcher. So it's interesting to hear what he has to say. But the biggest part of it is, the change that happens in midlife for women, which is menopause, where it completely changes and shifts. And I think that when women are able to get a handle on what's normal, what's not, um, what's happening in your life. I know that he interviewed like Halle Berry, and she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, the symptoms that you're experiencing are like gonorrhea or something like that." Excuse me if I get it wrong in some way. It turned out she was in menopause. And those sorts of things are scary, right? So there's a whole fear factor that is being eliminated with a lot of the new discussions that are coming
Yeah.
out. So, when I start to think about this, it's really that I'm thinking about not sexuality as we age, but more when you can debunk some of the myths, remove the mystery, talk about things or get more information out. This is something that I'm hoping that when we start to think about grief, start to think of true loss, it'll be similar to us uncovering some of these mysteries that scare us. When I talk to people who are younger, they're afraid of getting older because it's a big, mysterious, you know, set of landmines. And you are uncovering them for us right now, which I'm so grateful for.
Again, I hope that it's useful. It would be interesting to think through, as I have not, what are the key changes for women? Uh, I, I'm particularly interested in understanding more about that because I'm not a woman, and so I don't feel I have a handle on it. But so menopause is one change. Another big change, it seems to me, is widowhood.
Yes.
So uh, I think I've said it in talking to you. I say it all the time now. Every marriage that doesn't end in divorce ends in widowhood. There are a few exceptions, uh, but if you don't get divorced, Deborah,
I know. You put it
one
in
of
that way.
you is
You're
going to
always
do
the realist, Michael. You put it in such a real way that you're right. You lose someone to divorce or death,
it. Yeah.
but there is loss there.
Now with women, we know that by the age of 80, or it may be 80, or maybe 85, I forget the datum. Uh, there are twice as many women as there are men.
Yeah. Hmm.
Uh, so, and I mean, we know that women live longer than men.
Yeah. And I think that that gap is starting to, it depends on where you live.
Yeah,
But I think that that gap is starting to get smaller. And
particularly as women take on more roles that have traditionally been male roles.
yeah, and in different SES, when certain factors are equalized, like medical, SES, ability to all of these things. Like if you live in Washington D.C. and you're a man, the your lifespan is much shorter. It's like in your 60s than it is if you're in California. So where it's like 80 or something. But this is something that I do think that that is going to be continuing to get closer to women. The men's age will end up that there won't be the big disparity that we were seeing in the past, and that there still exists now.
Um, so, I mean, I think there's a whole discussion to be had about the nature of widowhood. And uh, it is apparently there are lots of similarities that men and women experience from what I'm learning now, but there are also some significant differences.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Um, I agree. I definitely agree with you. There is literature on the differences between men and women, um, and widowhood. You're right. And length of lifespan and quality of life is different for both. So it's easier, as is said clinically, without putting in any of the how it looks and feels, but just literature wise for women than it is for men. More when men suffer from loneliness and disconnect than women. But honestly, I think that that's going to start to change, and we also have new things that are added in, like social prescribing. We have all these new components that are addressing that, but sort of not head on, um, for widowhood, but that are out there that are just creeping into the US.
Interesting.
Do you know about social prescribing at all?
I don't know.
So
Well, I'm not
it's
sure what you mean, but
let me tell you about it because it's newish. So it came about in the UK, and it was because there was an actual loneliness epidemic, and there still is. And so they started to prescribe things like social connections, like community, all these sorts of things that would help to combat loneliness. We started to say, hey, that seems like a good idea here in the US. And so they've been starting to implement social prescribing, where a physician would actually prescribe, or a social worker or someone else that someone sees would actually prescribe that a person have community outreach in some way, where it's not just dropping off meals at a house, but it's that somebody is connecting with somebody in a meaningful way so that they can feel connected. And that's what social prescribing is addressing now. And that's new. And a lot of men have been living alone and are in need of, connection. It wasn't something that someone, people would say, oh, okay, you've lost a spouse, but there was never anything like, how do you get engaged in the community? Where are the resources that are supportive for you? A person doesn't get a lot of access to that. And so now they're trying to implement that. That's basically what
that's
social.
very interesting. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. Um, so it seems to me. Correct me if I'm wrong. It seems to me that women are more likely to have social connections that give them emotional support
Yeah.
than men are.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that there aren't women who are lonely. There are lots of
Right.
women.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is very interesting to me. As you certainly know, there's been this discovery of loneliness as something which is lethal.
Yes.
So it's frequently said now that loneliness is more likely to kill you than smoking.
You're right. I wrote a piece on social prescribing for Psychology Today, and I put it on my Substack as well. But the main thing is that, yes, social loneliness is a silent killer, and silent in many ways, because people who are lonely aren't being seen or heard by others, right? So it's it's more lethal than smoking, like you mentioned. So in reality, it's something that we should be addressing. It is being addressed. It's not as fast as the rapidity of the need, getting it out there isn't quite there yet. But I'm hoping that as more people learn about it, we'll be able to get many more opportunities to get, like maybe the Geriatric Mental Health Alliance could be one of those places that gets involved in social prescribing, those kinds of things, where loneliness could be combated before a person becomes clinically depressed, before they end up with other symptoms or other diagnoses.
We ought to, there's a geriatric mental health council in New York State. And I recently was part of a presentation which I had suggested to them of having people over 80 talk about their experience. And it was an interesting hour. I liked it anyway. But they seem to be interested in having some unusual discussions.
What do you mean?
Maybe we can talk to them about doing something on social prescription.
Oh, that'd be great. And yeah, they're doing a lot of stuff with that out of UJA in New York. I know that they're doing a lot of things on Long Island. I went to one of their conferences that was put together by a woman named Seppi Javaheri, and I learned a lot. They're trying to get people who are even involved in the arts to get involved in it. It's really something that that is ready to make a leap into becoming just a part of our sort of prescribing things that people need, staving off bigger issues that people have. It's interesting, and I gave a little bit of thought to this, and you touched on this earlier. When we're young, we're able to, all of our emotions are out there. You look at a 2-year-old and they say what they want to say and they feel how they want to feel. And how like a toddler feels, right? And then it's conditioned out of us. We're not supposed to show our emotions. We're supposed to, get on our best display rules and put those out there. And we become sort of tighter and tighter and tighter. And now you're talking about how that's loosening up for you now. And I think that if we can tap into some of that and loosen some of that up a little bit earlier, that's going to be liberating for people, instead of sort of like a jack in the box, all of a sudden it's just popping out.
Yeah. To be continued. It strikes me that it's easier to be angry than it is to be affectionate.
Yeah. There's more vulnerability with affectionate.
People lose their tempers much more frequently than they lose it with affection for other people.
Yeah.
So,
well, affection can be seen as weakness in some ways, and anger has a strength or power.
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Oh, we have much to talk about, Deborah.
For next time. So it was great to see you again today. Thanks for coming on, and I hope that you have a good week.
You too.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure talking with you as always. And
always with you too.
I'm very glad that we've reconnected.
Me too. Me too. Take care, Michael.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.